But I do think in our own gyms, when we're training with a trainer and we get a PB and we walk over and we ring a bell, everybody claps and cheers. That is an amazing positive reinforcement for what I'm doing in the gym. And that's what community is about. Big boss.
Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. Today, I have a very special guest on the podcast. First time on the podcast, though for many of you, you know this man already. He's been an industry expert and a podcast host for many, many years. It's JT. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, g'day, MK.
I should go by MK. That'd be good. There's too many Michaels in the world. I need to switch it up.
I like it. We might have started something here. Listeners, write in. Is he Michael or is he MK?
Let me know. So JT, for listeners who are just getting to know you for the first time and maybe haven't discovered your podcast yet, just give everyone a little bit of a 2-minute bio. Who are you? Where you been? What are you doing now?
I am often regarded in the industry as a fitness industry lifer or fitness industry loser, depending on what angle you want to take. I started in the industry in 1988 and have never left. It's like a vacuum that every time I think I'm going to leave, it sucks me back, which I don't really have a problem with because I love what I do. So I started as a gym floor instructor, which is for many people listening today, they're now almost prehistoric like dinosaurs. We used to walk the gym floor. We used to write programs for people. It was included in membership. But yes, they are very rare these days, and it's unusual to see one on any gym floor. Club owner, or club manager, then club owner, then unemployed club owner, and I don't know if you know anybody that's an unemployed club owner, Michael, but then you become a consultant.
And that's what you do. Thank you so much for that, JT. I love having guests like you on this podcast because you have such a global perspective on this industry, and you've done it all from being on the floor and in the trenches to managing and owning to speaking and connecting with other gym owners. So I love having folks like you on this podcast. And we're going to actually circle back to Rex Roundtables in a few minutes because I want to ask you more about that. But let me start by picking your brain about Australia versus US. So I think, I know our markets have a lot in common, but there are also some differences. So if you were to say, what do you think that the US market, the fitness industry over here could learn from Australia? What are you all doing better than us these days?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. I think historically, the US has always been ahead of Australia in so many different areas. But I think these days, there are some little nuances that I think make a difference that relate a lot to the customer experience. One example is there is not a single staff member in a health club in Australia that does not wear a uniform. Like,
wow, okay. Yeah.
Everybody wears a uniform. So, and maybe that goes back to school days where we all wear uniforms at school and your kids don't have to in the US. But I do think that makes it really easy for members to be able to identify who works there and who's working out there. So it's a small thing like that. And then obviously with that comes name tags. So I think it's such a small thing, but it just makes it so easy for our members to identify, like I say, who works there. Everything else, I would have to say.
That's a great one, JT. I don't think it's that small at all. I think it's a great one.
Yeah, I like it because I often walk into clubs and I can never work out who's who in the zoo. Uh,
100%. And I come from a background in hospitality when I worked in hotels, and we all had to wear uniforms. It was a big part of what it meant to be hospitable, was to make sure it's very clear that when we're in those outfits and those uniforms, everyone sees us as an extension of our space, of that hotel in my case. But same thing for a gym. We were always a big fan of, at Mark Fisher Fitness, of having the trainers really stand out from the crowd. And they always wore these kind of like purple shirts to make sure everyone could walk in the room and say, oh, that's the person I go to for help. That's the person I go to with questions or for support. So I think it's a great distinction. And you're right. In the US, I don't see people doing that much at all. I think it's a great lesson. Yeah. What else? Anything else about in the difference between the two?
you know what? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say there's absolutely no difference.
Yeah.
But perhaps in different pockets in Australia, it's more competitive than the US because we
Mm-hmm.
we got 27 million people that live in our entire country, which is the same size as the US. So it's a little bit more populated in America than it is here. However, just in those small pockets, we might have. It could be like the Flatiron District in New York. There's that many gyms in a space, but we just don't have that population. So that's a really interesting challenge that we face. We also have in Australia, which I guess is interesting for lots of your functional gym owners listening today, is there's a lot of I'm going to say pressure. Pressure may not be the right word, but I'll say pressure uh, to have accredited and registered fitness professionals working in the clubs. So we actually have a body called Oz Active, and then that acts as a registration body. So you become a personal trainer, and then you register and you keep your continuing education credits up in order to stay a registered trainer. And there is a lot of um, outward pressure that that's the type of person you would train with. It's not the person that's got their certificate off a back of a cereal box.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's a huge, I think it's a big difference because we have so many competing kind of certification bodies in the US. There's not a ton of coordination among them. And so I think, something like that in Australia, I think really does a good job of like legitimizing the profession to have that kind of that oversight in one body where people have to be registered from. I think that's great. I wonder if the US could ever pull off something like that. We might never know.
Well,
Let me switch gears and ask you a different question. Oh, go
just
ahead.
before we do, I think you're going to have to, if we're going to tap into
Mm,
health insurance, if we're going to tap into being uh, a credible alternative to medicine or to be working with allied health professionals, then it's a minimum
yeah.
qualification that our trainers are going to need if we go that route. And it it, it would make sense because we are the best form of medicine to get people healthy without drugs. It's going to be an important component moving forward for us I guess, legitimize what we do as an
Yeah.
industry.
I think that's a great point, JT. You're right. I think if the US were ever to get our shit together and have a unified approach to healthcare, I think, gyms and places like gyms would be, as we are already, on the front lines of the health crisis in this country.
Mm.
And I think if we were to coordinate, I think we would need to kind of professionalize and legitimize in a lot of ways. And I think Australia is probably a really great example of what that could look like, or at least a direction we could head.
Yes, sir.
That's awesome. I think that gives us some good food for thought. The other thing I want to ask you about, which is, I was doing a little research to this because we had not met before, so I wanted to, stalk you a little bit online, and I read in one of your bios that you visited kind of over or trained at over 500 different facilities as a customer over the years, over 500 different gyms, which is incredible. That's amazing. And one of my question for that, I was like, wow, what I want to ask someone who's been in that many gyms before. And I know in your definition of gyms, I know you're talking about both small functional training gyms and, bigger box gyms, health clubs, but across all those fitness spaces, I want to know what are some of your most common first impressions? both positive and negative. When you walk into those spaces, obviously you've developed a keen eye for what to look for that's good and what you see very often that's not good. So what are some of your most common first impressions?
Really interesting question, Michael. And let me be clear to all the listeners, I don't pull the "Do you know who I am" card, because I pay and I go in literally as a drop in visitor or a casual visitor, so I pay to visit, which also gives me the right then to critique them. I feel, because I'm not asking for any
Yeah,
favors from
I
them.
agree.
So, so I think the fascinating thing is even that process of how you buy a pass to go to a gym, and what happens when you walk in. I went into a club in Boston 3 months ago, and it's a beautiful facility. And I know the owner. And I walked in and I said, "Look, I just want to pay for a casual visit, or a drop in visit." And she said, "Oh, everybody gets their first visit free." And I said, "Yeah, no, no, no. I'm never going to join. I live in Australia. I'm happy to pay." And they're like, "No, no, no. We'll give you the first visit free." And I'm like, so that's one example where I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
give them money, and they didn't know who I was, but that was their process. And I kind of scratched my head a little bit and think, do we leave money on the table? Then I was at another club in
Mm.
Chicago, that will remain nameless, Lifetime, and I went in there and I had to fill in a form to be able to go in and visit. I just dropped in there. I didn't call, and again, if people are unaware, it's a $50 drop-in visit for a day, but I was only going to be there an hour, but I needed a day pass, and it wouldn't take. I had to fill in a form, and the form online would not take my Australian phone number. So I said to the lady, "Can I put yours in?" And she went, "No, you need to put yours in." And I went, "Yes, but it's not taking mine." And she said, "Well, I'm sorry." And I went, "Okay." Um, so then I made one up, but the one I made up, she said, "You just made that up." And I said, "Yeah, I did, so that I could get in." And she goes, "Well, that's not how it works. So I'm sorry." And I said, "Look, I got $50 here. I want to give him a $50. I just want to go and have a workout." And she said, "Look, I'm sorry. It's just, we just can't do it." I said, "Oh, all right, no worries." Would you believe I only know one person that lives in Chicago? And he walked out of the lift at that very moment. And he goes, "JT, what are you doing here?" And I
Wow.
said, "Oh, Billy, yeah, I was just going to go in for a workout." And he goes, "Oh, well, what's going on?" I said, "Oh, they won't take my credit card, $50, and I can't get my phone number in there." And he said, "Come on, come over with me." So I went over and he said to the lady, same lady, I might add, and he said, he's, "I get one free visit a month for a guest, don't I?" And she said, "Yes, you do, sir." And he said, "He's my guest." So not only did I then get in for free, I got in. So again, you kind of scratch your head,
That's
because
amazing.
I get what happens on front desks, and I understand how front desks work. But the first part of walking into a club will either make or break that relationship. And I do wonder sometimes whether our front desk team is so regimented with their rules and their guidelines that
Hmm.
they just don't think outside the
Yeah.
box for some people. And like, I'm an exception, sure, but I'm sure there's other ones that come in every week, that want to give us money, and we're like, "No, we have a process that we need to go through. So sorry, you can't give us money."
Yeah. JC, those are both really great examples. And I think, I see that all the time in working with gym owners is that sometimes we get so obsessed with the process that we forget about the people, right? We get so obsessed with having the right process and the right SOP and doing the training to make sure the team never gets it wrong, and always gets it right. But in the process, we forget to empower them to think for themselves, to problem solve in real time, to do what's best for the customer, even if it's against the process. And I think that's, and having visited so many facilities, the fact that that's a trend that you see I think points to the fact that we need more managers and leaders that are teaching our staff to think for themselves and not just, blindly follow process. And so I think it's a really good one. That's a really good one. I think it's good food for thought for our listeners as well, to go back to their businesses right now and say, where in your businesses do you have a process that your team is just following blindly, maybe at the expense of your client experience?
And I do wonder sometimes, Michael, where we are in our industry, we're so membership focused that we want people to become a member, that are we actually leaving money on the table with drop-in visits and casual visits?
Sure.
Could that actually be a serious line on our P&L called casual workouts or drop-in visits? And I think there are still people out there that don't want to join a gym yet.
Yeah, 100%. I think I've seen, at least from my perspective, a growing trend since COVID, with people traveling more again, and people being a little more commitment phobic since COVID. But I think even, I know you will focus on a lot of bigger health clubs. And for those places, I've seen people traveling more and needing to pop in when they're on business trips and things like that, or visiting family. And for the smaller training gyms that we work with, the trend I've seen is a lot more people moving to kind of cancel any time memberships or packages people can buy for out of town visitors. Training gyms tend to get a fewer drop-ins, because there's not usually a come and go as you please policy for a lot of the folks we work with. Yeah. But still, I think I see still that trend that people need a chance to just buy a pack or cancel any time membership. There's less commitment, more people traveling, and so I think we're seeing that in both places. Let me go back to. I promised I was going to get back to.
Oh, can I just tell you about a CrossFit club that I went to in Santa Monica? And
please.
This is a number of years ago. It's a training facility. So I think the drop-in visit, which I think again is a pretty good price, was like $30 to go in and just do a CrossFit class, which again, a lot of people listening today would go, oh yeah, we're kind of similar to CrossFit, maybe not in the technique, but what we offer. So it was $30 for a drop-in, or $40 and I got a t-shirt. I paid $40, $10 extra. Neither here nor there, but walk out with a t-shirt.
Great.
And again, I think for the listeners, is there a possibility to be adding in merch on top of whatever prices you're selling, whether it's memberships or drop-ins or packs, just an extra few bucks, because you've probably got people that are absolute raving fans that would love a piece of merch to go with their 10 pack or 20 pack of sessions that they've just bought. And for 10 extra bucks, yep, they'll buy it for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. I wish I had that idea a few years ago, JT, because we had a lot of folks pop into Mark Fisher Fitness, and we allowed drop-ins, but only if you didn't live in town. If you lived in town, we didn't allow it. Maybe we're leaving money on the table. Great food for thought. But we allowed people for out of town to drop in, and almost everyone who came from out of town were people in industry who wanted to pop in, or friends of our members. And they all probably would have benefited from walking with some merch as a memento from their visit. So I think that's a great idea for folks who do offer drop-ins and casual visits. I think, adding on a couple bucks for a memento from that workout, I think is fantastic. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
It just makes it an even more memorable experience. And then you have that person out there promoting you wherever they go next.
100%. Totally. Yep. I think it's a great concept, and that's what,
that's great. Yeah, good example. I want to circle back to Rex Roundtables. So for people listening who don't know, Rex Roundtables, I think, is one of the industry's kind of longest mastermind programs, and I think is one of the largest kind of networks of general fitness industry folks around the world. And I know that you said in a previous interview I listened to, you said you originally joined that group because you, as a gym owner, felt a little lonely and felt like you want to be part of something. You want to be part of a team, part of a community. And we hear that all the time from gym owners who listen to this podcast and then join our Unicorn Society group or some other, business coaching group, is that they wanted a chance to feel like they belong. And what we get for that is, we get all these other industry professionals who get to be our thought partners and our cheerleaders, and we get to learn from them. So now that I know that you've been part of the Rex Roundtables for a while, you lead a bunch of them. And so over the years, I wonder if you could think back to some specific wins you've had over the years that you can attribute directly to being part of a group like that? Obviously, we're big fans of it. We both do this work all the time. So I was wondering, you think back over the years, what are some wins you've had that you think you could really directly attribute to the fact that you were part of a group like Rex Roundtables?
Well, I can tell you about Tim, and Tim was an owner of a gym, and he was on Rex Roundtables, and he rang me, um, and I think I'd say I'm still friends with him, but maybe after this conversation, you'll wonder why. And he rang me and he said, "Oh, just wanted to let you know I've sold my business." And I said, "Oh, that's great." And he said I wouldn't have got what I got for the gym if it wasn't for Rex Roundtables. And I'm like, that's awesome.
Mm,
That made me feel great that we'd help him with these SOPs.
yeah.
We'd helped him with best practices. We'd helped him get positioning with his gym, and that he was able to sell it at a huge multiple. And he's when he rang me, he was in his Lamborghini, so he'd sold it for just over $5 million for his gym. Um, and he was ecstatic. And I thought he was actually ringing me, Michael, to say, I'm going to give you like 5% of the sale just to say thank you. But no, there was no cash back to me at all. But that's just, kind of one example that, and we actually see this multiple times in the US, where when you get peer to peer, non compete people in a room, and they actually are open and sharing about best practices, positioning, strategic planning, then that has this underlying foundation that when they exit, people walk in and they go, "Oh, you're a member of Rex, or you're a unicorn. Oh, well, that must mean you're at a certain standard." So that might add 0.25, zero point 0.5, or a full point to your multiple of EBITDA when you're selling your business. So I do think that there is this underlying current that when you're a member of a mastermind group, it adds value while you own your business, but it also adds value when you want to exit your business. And so that's the big one that we generally see is the return on investment often comes at a huge multiple on the exit. Of course, while they're actually in the business, there are ideas and strategies and plans that come at every time we get together. And I'm sure that the same when you bring your guys together, whether it's virtually or face to face. Just the crucible of thinking just goes crazy, doesn't it?
100%. I think there's just nothing like being in a room with other people who do what you do all day, especially because there's so few people in our lives who really get what it is to be a small business owner, right? To be self-employed, to run your own business is, it's an experience not many people have in their lives. So to be in a room with other people who get it, who understand what your struggles are, who understand what it's taken for you to get to where you are, and who have similar wins you can celebrate together, or ideas that you've never thought of before that are really going to change the game for you. I mean, it's just there's nothing more exciting than having that exchange of ideas from people who are just openly sharing. And so, yeah, I think that's great. And I think your point is also well taken that the real win can come for people when they exit, right? That your business is much more profitable, much better organized,
Mm-hmm.
much more ready to be sold, because you've done all the things to get it in that condition, right? And you'll sell at a much higher multiple than if you were handing over a gym that really wasn't ready for purchase. And I think that's a really, really great point.
I find the big one is the empathy. The empathy that even when we were talking before we were talking, when and recording, Michael and I were talking about podcasting. There's
Yeah.
the empathy between us as podcasters. There's the empathy between us
Hmm.
as owners of functional training gyms. I know what you're going through. You know what I'm going through. And so we have this common ground, which automatically breaks down a barrier when we need to talk about issues or challenges. Uh, I think, like, not I think, I know that there's no reason why every single person on the planet should not be in some form of mastermind group, because you can't go home and talk to your husband, your wife, or your partner every day about business because that'll just drive them crazy. But you need to be able to unload, you need to decompress, you need to debrief. And when you do that
Mm-hmm.
with someone who understands and has walked a mile in your shoes like yours, then that completely changes that conversation. And maybe there'd be a whole lot more marriages and partnerships that would stay together if everybody was in a mastermind group.
Yeah, well said, my friend. Well said. Yeah, that's a whole nother separate episode. I'll have to have you back for us to discuss. But let me ask you this: I know I've mentioned a few times on this podcast that while our main audience is a lot of smaller functional training gyms, you do work with a lot of larger health club facilities, which is actually where I got my start. I used to be a massage therapist, and I worked for a few big health club facilities as a massage therapist, and so I want to ask you another comparison question. Like I compared the U.S. to Australia. I'm curious what all the smaller studios of the world can learn from those larger operations. What is it that those larger health club facilities do really well that maybe some of those smaller functional training gyms could learn from?
Nothing. No. No, well,
So it's a big goose egg on that one.
well, there isn't. I think the beautiful thing about functional training facilities is their community. And certainly big box clubs
Mm,
attempt to do community, but they don't do it well. They'll do what we would call
sure.
micro communities. So they'll do a community of all the people that do cycle, or all the people that do aerobic classes or group fitness classes. But the average person that gets on the treadmill and does strength, they're not really in the community of the big box clubs. So there's no stickiness
No.
for them. So to me, that's a huge advantage. And I think the US Surgeon General a few years ago talked about and released a report around loneliness and how important being able to
Mm-hmm.
connect socially is, and that loneliness is one of these literally silent killers of people. And and our functional training facilities truly differentiate from big box clubs with the ability to connect with people. What big box clubs do really well is they have structured sales processes and they have
Mm-hmm.
automation. And the cost of automation and the cost of those structured sales processes has dropped considerably now. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, there's no reason why any gym cannot be using some form of automation, some form of when I say CRM, I truly mean customer relationship management, like managing the relationship between you and the
Mm-hmm.
customer, as opposed to
Yep.
database management. And I think that's an area that training facilities could improve and learn from. Is what does that continuing correspondence from that facility look like, and how can we use that to upsell, cross sell, downsize, upsize, whatever we want with our customers? Because the big box clubs, they do that well. And to be frank, Michael, if your name is on a database in a big box club, they will email you or call you or text you uh, until you die, or say stop, either or. And I think a
Yep.
functional gym, you tend to drop off their radar, as it were, after maybe 6 months. And there's no reason why. They haven't asked to drop off, but owners drop them
Yep.
off.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, JT. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I think you're right that the smaller gyms can't be beat when it comes to community. Especially because so many of them are small enough. Most members we're talking to 100, 200, 300 members at an average gym. It's a small community. You can know a lot of those people, and you're all coming at the same times. You see a lot of the same people working with the same coaches. A lot of community building. And you're right, the big box clubs just really can't compete in that world. In fact, many people choose the big box clubs so they don't have to talk to anyone, right? Myself included. A lot of times I've had a membership to
Yeah.
the Blinks or the big box clubs here. It's because I wanted alone time. I didn't want community. I wasn't going there to make friends. And so I really get that. And I couldn't agree more that I think the big box clubs, I think by virtue of like the scale that they have for much longer, that they've had to get good at automations and really good sales systems. And I think that the smaller gyms have just been catching up. And frankly, the software we've had access to is just catching up. We're a big fan. One of our sponsors of this podcast is a Kilo, and Kilo has great automation software. We mention them all the time. But places like Kilo that'll have automation from your website to your marketing automation to your CRM long after your clients have been gone. They do it all, but they're new. They've only been around for a few years, and software like it has only been around for a few years, really available to smaller gyms. So I think you're spot on there. I think it's a trend we've seen that these smaller gyms are getting much better at using automation, and there's no reason why they can't play at the same level at this point of the big box gyms. I think it's great. Anything else you would add to that?
Well, and I think it's okay for owners of any facility to say, I don't know what I don't know, and be humble enough to say, I don't know what I don't know. I know a shitload about training clients, but I don't know what I don't know about software. So I need to go in and I need to understand it, and I need to work my head around what that looks like. Um, we have a Rex member here in Australia, and he's an absolute tech nerd around Microsoft 365. And there's probably people listening today that all have Microsoft 365 subscriptions, but then they also have 45 other subscriptions that they could probably save that money on because it all could be done with Microsoft 365. That's just one example of us not being techie people. We're practical and we're technical people, but we're not technology based. So I think I would challenge everybody today to actually do a tech audit in their business to see what are we using, what don't we need, where are our blind spots, and is there technology that could reduce that blind spot or get rid of it altogether?
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. I hope our listeners are listening and they go do that to see where can technology help, and where is technology maybe hindering your ability to be as efficient and agile as you want to be. So, well, speaking of technology, it's actually a great segue to, I think, one of my last questions here for you as we start to wrap things up. My last question for you, and it has to come up on, I think, on every podcast where I have a guest these days. We got to talk about AI. It seems like it's on everyone's mind. Everyone who's in business is talking about it. I heard you say, I think, on a recent podcast episode where you talked about AI on your podcast, you talked a little bit about AI-driven search, right? So I wonder if you could say a little more about where you think AI is going in the short term when it comes to things gym owners should be paying attention to. And then maybe if we have time, we can talk a little bit about long term. We can get out our crystal balls and make some bets about the long term future. But for now, you want to just talk a little bit about AI-driven search and what people should be thinking about today?
Yeah, it's an interesting. And look, I'm no expert, and I will absolutely say that up front. And what we talk about today, Michael, could well be in the trash can tomorrow because something
Yeah,
changes with
that's okay.
AI.
If we're super wrong, we'll just delete it.
I like how we can go back and edit. But we're
Yeah.
seeing more and more people are using Chat GPT, Gemini, whatever platform they're
Hmm.
using from an AI perspective to search for gyms. So in the old days, we used to go in and we would search gyms near me or gyms in Flatiron or gyms in Syracuse. Um, what we're now finding is that they're using that same phraseology, but they're dropping that into their chatbot. So what the chatbot does is generally will search, obviously the internet. So what to me, in my simple mind, at this point, is that we really need to go back to blogging, and blogging is going to be a critical component to those chat bots finding our information on a website. So I think the latest stats that I heard is that there's around about 15% of people are now finding gyms through chat platforms or AI platforms as opposed to necessarily going into Google. So we've got to work out, and no one really knows, to be honest. And if anyone is telling you that they know, they probably don't. They're using
They're
chat
making
to,
it up. I
they're making it
agree.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's
Yeah.
so new. It is so new. And
Yeah.
so, like, if I'm thinking about where am I spending my marketing dollar, I don't know if I'm going to be spending a shitload on SEO anymore on Google. I'm not sure if that's where I would be putting my money. I'm not saying I wouldn't spend some, but I think if we go back right to the beginning of today's conversation, and we talked about member experience, and you talked about hospitality, and I'm sure you and or Mark have met or have heard of Will Guardia from Unreasonable Hospitality. And if anybody
Mm-hmm.
listening
Yep.
today has not read that book, that is a must-read book for anyone that owns a functional training studio, because you can implement some of the things that he talks about in that book. Probably Mark Fisher Fitness was a predecessor to Unreasonable Hospitality. It's because that's the difference. And so my saying, to be honest, Michael, is it's not the bells and the whistles that AI can ring for us. It's still the people that ring the bells and blow the whistles that makes the difference. So AI will help us in our programming, and we can be using that to help in programming 100%. But it's really unlikely that AI can tell me whether I'm squatting too low or my back's not straight on my deadlifts or whatever the case may be. We can use AI to supplement some of the things that we do in our businesses, or even complement some of the things that we do in our business, but it can never replace what we do. And I think that's a really important factor for everybody listening today who owns a functional fitness facility, is you will never be made redundant by AI. There will always need to be human to human touch, because that's the oxytocin and the dopamine hits that we get. So that's a critical factor in the enjoyment factor. And then and just from a safety perspective, we still need people, but we can use AI to help us in our programming and in our communications. That's where I see a huge leverage for us.
Yeah, I think those are great observations, JT. And I agree with you. I think I find myself with every AI conversation to have to put the words "for now" at the end of any statement I make. Right.
Yeah.
So if I'm gonna agree with you, I'm gonna agree with you 100%, as long as I can add the "for
For
now"
now.
part.
I love that.
Because I think in some cases AI is coming for us fast,
And
in
we
terms
can't.
of like the ability for it to an AI bot to give us feedback on our squats. I think is actually in the works, and we're going to see that in the next few years.
Oh no,
But I think the places where I don't think I need a for now,
it's 100% here now. Like there
where
is
I think we
apps.
don't need a for now, is in the people part.
Correct.
Oops, say that again.
Yeah, 100%. There are apps now and videos that can absolutely tell me whether I'm doing
Yes.
it right, or whether my right leg is slightly stronger to my left leg, or my flexibilities, vowed performance to all
Yep.
that. They have amazing software, but we still need that person to do
Yeah.
something with us.
Yeah. I think that's the piece we're on the same page about, is even when I think long term, I say all the time that in gyms we're selling two things. We sell results and we sell relationships. And the relationships part, at least for now, I still going to say this, that is going to be hard to replace in humans, right? I think we have a special connection, special chemicals that get released when we're with each other.
Yeah.
And there's some people who, who do say that AI will get to the point where people will feel like they have just as strong connection with AI bots that they do with humans. I think it's a longer ways away, so I don't want to rule it out for when people listen to this podcast in 5 to 10 years. But I think we're on the same page, which is for now, it's a really great tool to help you with program design, really great tool to help you with your messaging and your marketing, especially if you don't think of yourself as a great writer. It's really good at helping you write and improve your writing, write more persuasively, write more clearly. All of that is really helpful. Creating content like blogs. I thought your point there was so well taken, right? Which is, if these AI bots are looking over the internet, we need as many places out there for them to find us as possible and point back to the right place, which is typically our website, our social media accounts. So I think having more content out there that people are finding and pointing back in the right direction, I think is useful. Whether it's for SEO or for the AI search, it's still useful, right? I think backlinks from blogs and other sites and partners were always a big piece of the SEO puzzle. I think now they serve that purpose and additional purpose of really being content that the AI wants to chew up, right? It's a content hungry machine and it needs more words. And if we can put more words out there, then it's going to be ideally drawn to us. And again, like you, I'm no expert, but that makes sense to me. Anything else? So, since we have our crystal balls out, anything else you see coming down the pike for this industry? Anything else that you want the industry to be focused on in the coming years?
Look, here's an idea that people might already have. And it relates back to that community, and it relates back to something that AI can never do. Is I've been in a couple of gyms on my visits that have a bell on the gym floor, and the bell is rung by members when they get a PB.
Yes.
And I think that creates community. And I almost think a bell in a fitness facility now is as compulsory or mandatory as a treadmill or a rower or a ski erg, is that you've got a bell. There are more and more people doing high rocks, which I think is amazing. I love the concept of, because I do think one of our problems in our industry is I join and there's no finish line. Like, how long am I need something, and eVolt scan or in-body scan will help give me some definitive answer on where I'm at, but it's not it's not actually what I'm here for. I want to be able to compete in a way or cross a finish line in some way. So I think High Rocks has been fantastic, and I think it will continue to grow, as will probably 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other sort of games, athletic competitions. But I do think in our own gyms, when we're training with a trainer and we get a PB and we walk over and we ring a bell, everybody claps and cheers. That is an amazing positive reinforcement for what I'm doing in the gym. And that's what community is about. Big box clubs, that's going to be tough to do. But for all of the functional training facilities that are listening today, that's the easiest, fastest way for you to grow community. Put a bell in and have, whenever there's a PB, ring that bell.
Yeah. What a great idea. Beautiful thought. I think those are great words to end on, JT. So thank you for that. Thanks for the great conversation as a whole. We covered a lot of ground, covered a lot of topics, shared lots of wisdom. For people who want more from JT, how do they find you on the internet? Tell them about your podcast.
Oh, look, you can just Google me and hopefully I come up on all the good sites, not those bad sites. But yeah, look, I'm on LinkedIn, Justin Tamset on LinkedIn. Our podcast is the Fitness Business Podcast. We started back in 2015, so we just I just recorded show 550. So we've done a few shows. There's
Good for you.
So yeah, if you check out fitnessbusinesspodcast.com or rexroundtables.com or Justin Tamset on LinkedIn, you'll find me.
That's amazing. We'll include links to all of that down below, and we're not far behind you. I think we just passed 450, so we're coming up. We're coming up behind you. It's great to know another great podcaster out there. Listen to a ton of your episodes. If you all like this podcast, you're gonna love JT's podcast. So listen to them both. Thanks again for your time, my friend. It was so good to get to meet you. Can't wait to have you back again. And dear listeners, I'll see you on the next one. Have a kick-ass day.
Have a kick-ass day.